Everyone, thank you for coming. Mayor Glotz, Clerk Nancy O'Connor, Trustee Bill Brennan, Trustee Colleen Sullivan, our Will County resident, Trustee Mike Mueller. Thanks everyone for coming. And our Will County Assessor, Joseph Krall.
Frankfort Township Assessor.
Frankfort
Township.
Yes. We appreciate everyone coming, and Joe's great. Last year, it's probably why we don't have as many. This whole room was filled with people, and they all set up an appointment to see Joe, and he helped them with understanding how it works and lowering your taxes. We are going to turn it over to Joe so he can help all the Will County residents.
Can everybody hear me? I'd love to not speak into a microphone because it doesn't work out. I am Joseph Krall. That's me. The next one. That used to be me when I started this job in 2010. See, lots of dark hair and not the beard. That was me back in 2012. And the last time I was here, I didn't use slides. I found that if you come to these things and all of a sudden somebody is pushing a lot of slides on you, it becomes a waste. People are not as happy. They want interaction. I'm going to do it. Then I did the speech here last year, a year ago, and I didn't bring slides. And it was like, well, you should have had slides. So I'm going to blow by some of these slides from back in the day. And this was done back when, in 2012, I've updated the figures, but this was back when I thought we could talk about property taxes, and it becomes the same conversation. But we all need to get on the same page about what property taxes are. Who thinks property taxes are too high? Notice my hand is up. Absolutely. I think property taxes, and we'll get to that, it's one of the single biggest expenses we have as a homeowner. And it's a tax bill that gets sent to us. We open it up and we have to pay it, or they're going to take your property from you. Now, to the next. This was me back in 2012, property tax and you. I was like, we're gonna explain it. Next one. What do property taxes fund? Can anybody tell me? Schools, library, fire department, villages, police, park districts. Next. Property tax is the largest single tax we pay, and it funds those things. Every person and business in Illinois is affected by property taxes. We all have we either get services from them, some more than others. Parents that have kids probably recoup more of their property taxes back than, say, seniors. But seniors back in the day generally tended to have that same situation back when they had kids. So it works out. And then there are exemptions for seniors, not much, but they do give you an exemption back so that you are not paying as much as somebody that doesn't have schools and children. Owners of real property. Real property is a term, the land and things that are affixed to it. So if you put up an above ground pool, technically you could pick that pool up and move it, and that would be personal property. Whereas if you bury the pool in the ground, it's real property. You have affixed it to the ground. And that's where that comes into as far as value goes. Next one. Property taxes in the state of Illinois are ad valorem, or according to value. The more the property you have is worth, the more you're going to pay. People are like, well, I own a townhome. Well, or if you owned a yurt or a tent that cost $1 million that was affixed to the ground, then you would pay based upon the value of that tent. It's not, I've got people that live in very expensive townhomes, not so much maybe Brookside Glen, but you go over into some of the areas of Frankfort and we have a $750,000 townhome. And he's like, well, I pay more than the house. Well, it's worth $750,000. That's what ad valorem means. What determines my property tax bill? Next. Your portion of the bill is determined by your assessed value. Now, what is an assessed value? The assessment on your property value is officially entered in the county assessment books by me. This value is used to determine your portion of the total tax bill and burden each property owner will bear. Your assessed value is 33% of your market value. So when you look at what my assessed value is, next slide, you could take that number, multiply it by 3, and that's what I'm saying is the value of your home on average of the 3 preceding years. Now that's the state of Illinois and the way the state, I'm not gonna bet around the bush. It's not meant to be easy to understand. It's somewhat meant to be confusing. Just like the fact that tax bills don't come out until after the election. I mean, right after the election, because that's the point in time that, you could do something is when you elect your representatives that set your tax bill, but the tax bill comes out right after. And the fact that taxing bodies set their levies in November and December, when we're all worried about Christmas and Thanksgiving and not attending the meetings, and that's when taxes are raised. More than anything else, assessment equity comes into play. How you are assessed, the same as your neighbors. It's my philosophy that if you're in a 3-step branch and your neighbor's in a 3-step branch, and they're built around the same time and they have the same amenities, I want them to have the same value. What is that value? That value is what I think a typical buyer is going to pay for that property in an arm's length transaction. Not, I'm selling to my brother, or, God, my wife really, really loves the view from the, there, sees that tree. That's not a typical assessment. Some people pay more, some people pay less. Some people are great hagglers. They walk in and they get something rather cheaply, but does that mean they should pay less taxes for it? No, it's what they would sell it for in an open market in that arm's length transaction. This is what the neighborhoods and the way we look when next one, and what I prefer things to be, but it just doesn't tend to work out that way because we live in a state that tends to elect property tax appeals lawyers as our representatives. I mean, you can look downstate and we look at, the 2 largest property tax appeal law firms is Madigan's law firm and Cullerton's law firm. And, that's a whole nother story that we really don't want to get into here. When is your assessment? January 1st of the preceding year. So when you receive the tax bill, that is for last year's taxes and last year's assessment. That number is the value that I put on your home. And it means something because property values shift up and down depending upon what sales are. And the state does what's called a 3-year sales ratio study. They look at what the sale price was compared to what my assessment is. And they say, Joe, you're off by X amount, and we're going to raise or lower you. Now, question. I am probably going to increase the value of all of your homes by 6% this year. How do you guys feel about that? Does that make anybody happy? No? What about sad? Is anybody sad that I'm increasing the value by 6%? You can say it. You do. Why is that?
My taxes are going up.
No, your tax is going to go up, not because of that. And I'll explain why. Next. Go ahead. Just a couple. Just keep going. Get to 10 houses. There you go. All right. Overall, assessment changes do not affect your tax bill. If I walked in tomorrow and I was upset at all of you people for coming, nobody showed up to my meeting, that's it. Double everybody's assessment. The only thing that would happen would be the rate that they apply to it would get cut in half. Imagine we live in a community with just 10 houses, all right? And we have one taxing body, the park. Next. Each house, and I'm the assessor, and I value everybody's house at $100. Next. After consideration is determined that a total of $100 is needed to pay for the park. Go on. Tax rate equals the total amount of the levy divided by the total assessed to the community. So you add all those up. Go on. Tax rate equals the total amount needed or the tax rate would be 10%. Go on. Since each house is valued at $100, if we apply the tax rate of 10% to every property, everybody pays $10, it covers the $100 for the park. Next. I did this in 2012 when property values jumped down. And everyone's like, oh, that's great, my property value is going to go down. And my tax bill goes down. But it doesn't, because the levy doesn't change. If I value all the houses at 50, that's half the amount. All that happens is when they get to the tax rate calculation, and don't get me wrong, everybody gets upset at tax rates. Tax rate is just the equalizer number. It's just a number that makes one number equal another. If the levy stays here and the assessed value drops, the tax rate goes up. If I cut everybody's assessment in half, the rate doubles. And that's just applied at the end. That's applied a month before the tax bills come out, after the levies from the taxing bodies have been generated. The reverse is true. If I walked in tomorrow and doubled the value of all of your homes, and everything is worth twice, all that would happen would be the tax rate would get cut in half. Now, but Joe, my tax bill goes up every year. Well, yeah, it does. That's because the levy goes up. Each one of those taxing bodies every year decides, and they meet and they have a meeting, and they say, we're going to raise the amount we're asking for. And they can do that, they can do three things. They can lower it any amount they want, they can keep the value the same, or they can raise it. And when they raise it, there's a limiting law called PTEL. And that limiting law says that you can't raise more than the consumer price index, which is a gallon of gas, a loaf of bread, milk. I mean, all these things that are brought into the CPI. And generally that number is a lot lower than 5%. Except this year, it's actually going to be higher. And then the limiting factor is going to be that 5%. Now taxing bodies raise that 5%. Some raise less, some raise what they need. I mean, I truly wish we were in a government that, budgeted for what they needed, not for what they could get. But then again, we have a pretty impressive school system. And that school system requires money. All right, so getting back to this, since each house valued at 50, we apply the tax rate at 20% to get the 20% of 50 is $10. Next. Go on. Even if your assessment goes down, there's no guarantee my tax bill will be lower. Also, it's correct. Actually, the possibility to go down, your tax bill could go up. This is a chart here of where your property taxes go. And without fail, schools generally take the increase as much as they can. That is School District 161, Lincoln Way. Fire departments do too, and the fire departments are part of your village. So normally when I would give this talk to, say, Frankfort or Mokina, there would be a separate pie wedge. And the Village Utility Park is part of that, is the fire department. But they're fire departments. And believe it or not, 14% is rather low for a village and all of that, and the fire department together. So I think your elected leaders are doing a pretty good job. Any questions at this point? All right, this is just explaining how systems work. We'll get to how to appeal your assessments next. Go on. So next, you're just going to go through your schools. We have great schools. Here, stop. This is the levy of 2022 adjusted numbers. This is what our school system spends. Per day, 74,000 for 157, 36 for Mokina. Your grade school is 74. 210 is $175,000 a day, based upon what our property taxes are. Now, we elect those people that sit on school boards that decide this, and we have a relatively good school system. We do have a closed school, which you could argue, and the one thing about our school systems that people fail to mention is that we are, I think it was like 1980, mid-80s, the state legislature really found it hard to start funding schools, so they came up with the term affluency, and they labeled certain areas affluent in which, whereas if you were to go to, say, Richmond Park, or you were to go to other areas, the state and your income tax helps fund your schools, those schools. So our income tax funds those schools. Our schools don't get that. Frankfort Township, Mokina, Summit Hill, Frankfort, they're all affluent. And that was the argument when we talked about splitting up the school systems and keeping North open, was that if we did that, the West Central would have dropped out of affluency, which means that the state would have had to pony up money, which would have solved our issues and kept our school open. But nobody, tended to listen to that. I mean, we tried, we fought, we pushed for it, but nobody did. Schools are a major part of our tax bill. Now, what does it matter to you guys? Well, that's where part of it comes from. And even if I raise your value 6%, it doesn't affect your tax bill. But is your tax bill going to go up? Oh yeah. It's based upon that CPI number, and that CPI number is going up. When the costs of what, goods and services government uses, they're going to raise. Next. 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 Some of that not be right. All right. Let's talk. Pass this out. This is a soft appeal form. We're going to talk about filling it out. Now, let's, the first thing that I want any of you guys to do before we get to this point is to make sure that my numbers are correct. When I first took over this office, I sat through a lot of appeals, and the amount of appeals that were put through generally failed because people didn't understand the nomenclature or how things go. They would argue that so many arguments came through that they'd want, their argument literally said that we should raise them. It was just, it didn't make a lot of sense. People were upset, and they're upset about high taxes. So, I thought to myself, appeal season, the way this works, is that August 1st, I turn my numbers in mid-July. August 1st, they publish them, and you have a 30-day window to file an appeal. That 30 days, you get the information, you've got to submit it. If it's right or wrong, it's judged by 3 individuals at the Cook County, or at the Will County Board. They yes or no, pass or fail, and maybe you can move on to PTAB or other things. That's not really fair to you. You don't follow sales, you don't follow any of these things that go on. So I thought, why not invite you into the process? Why not give you the opportunity to plead your case or talk about how things go? And I started what's called the soft appeal. It's a name I pulled out. I'm like, all right, we're going to soft appeal, which means that I spend the first 6 months of every year deciding these numbers. Why not give you the opportunity to supply me the information you think's important? Why not you sit down with me and we go over these things? And I'm a numbers guy. Standing in front of you guys talking, it's not my natural habitat. Sitting at a table with 2 computer screens up with spreadsheets of Excel and everything that we've got and all the sales lists, much better. I feel much more comfortable doing it because it's numbers, and numbers are what dictate why I do what I do. If 6 of your neighbors all sell for $400,000 a piece and you all have the same house, I can generally say that that's what your house is going to sell for. And this is mass appraisal. It's not exact appraisal. I'm not an appraiser. I'm not going into your home. I'm not looking at your countertops or your everything else. What I'm doing is I'm looking at a way so that your 3-step ranch is compared to the next door neighbor's 3-step ranch along the same level, so that when the tax bill comes, it's relatively the same. Now, it's hard when you cross taxing body and taxing districts, because you could look at Everett. We were talking about the school list, and you were looking at the difference between 161 and Mokina. It's insane. The referendums that was passed for 161, time and time again, failed in Mokina. The difference is the exact same house, valued at the exact same amount of money. Anyone know where Everett is? Everett is right where Mr. Benny's is. That street, that's the block off between 161 and 159. And without fail, when tax bills come out, on the 161 side, somebody will compare their house to their neighbor's tax bill across the street. And the exact same house is $1,000 difference. $1,000. And then like, well, why? Well, one community decided to fund their schools through referendums over and over again. And we can talk about referendums and what happens over time, and one didn't. And does it mean the schools are any different? I don't know. That's for you guys to decide. And 161 has great numbers, and the kids do, great when they move on to the Lincoln Way. All right, soft appeal. You got internet?
Yeah.
All right, pull up our website. Just started something about appeal, sorry. All right. No, there you go. You need to do that?
Here, I got you.
No. You have one job.
I know.
You're still A and K. A and K.
I'm trying to watch.
Sorry.
All right.
Technology.
So this one up on your search list.
It is, of course. This is the website. If you want to go get a copy of this form, if you lose the form you've got now, you can go to this website right now and pull it up. Soft appeal form 2020 or 2022 is right up there. But the first thing that I want you to do when you go home is I want you to look at the sketch I have for your house. Everything that we deal with is going to be based upon your house and your sketch of your house. So go to property search, agree. Now type in 194. The least amount of
On the address?
194. And then go to street name Kevin. I would suggest if you wanted to look at your whole block, just put in a few numbers from your name. It'll give you there. Hit search. This is my street. This is where I live. All right. This is every house on my street. Everything is related to PIN numbers. Nobody really uses addresses because addresses are put together by, at one point it was the post office and now it's the 911 centers, and you could go down a block and it would, 19406, 19408, 19436. I mean, so everything is done by PIN numbers. And it'll show you here all the PIN numbers. Click on 44, top one. All right. It's my house. Not my car, not this car, or whatever, I took a picture, it's there. The bottom part, you're going to see everything here, the valuation, the type of house, the dwelling, and you can utilize these when you file an appeal at the county level. I don't make you go take pictures. You can just use the sheets from my website and print those out. That's if you get to the county, which we try to avoid. This is my house. Click zoom on the sketch. That's a representation of my house in a sketch. We measure everything from outside dimensions. Every house is measured the same. I'm not measuring inside rooms. It's all the outside of what the house is. And you can go through and check. If I'm off on a dimension, that's what I want to know. What I really want to know is if you have areas open to above that I can't tell. There's a lot of times that there's two-story dwellings and you walk into a great room and there's no ceiling above you. There's times that I can't tell that without going in your house, and I don't want to go in your house. The government becoming that, they walk into your house. We're not getting into there. So you make measurements, you take measurements, and you check the sketch. That's going to be your first line of saying, is what I'm saying correct, or do I have a real case? If you have a case with a sketch, Bob right there will come out to your house and remeasure to make sure. And we will check all of our dimensions. All right, go back to the form. Go back to the.
Hey, Joe, real quick question.
Yeah.
You got a house, it's a 2-story house, you got a garage at the bottom level, right? There's no living area above the garage. How do you guys connect that into?
Is it heated space above the garage? Is it?
No, I'm saying there's no living area above the garage. Some houses have all living area above the garage.
Yeah, no, it wouldn't, so it'd just be a second floor. In fact, I think it, well, can you go back to the Frankfort Township? Try to think of another house on Kevin. Click 48. Nope. A lot of ranches in my area. 49.
So everyone knows too, if you're worried about missing something, this'll, Nick's back there taping it, it'll go on the Tinley Park YouTube channel too. So you can go back and watch it if you miss something.
And the coolest thing about all of this is that if you really want to deep dive into this, I take appointments. You guys can all meet with me one-on-one. We can sit in my office and I will pull up every house on your street. I will pull up all of the sales within your neighborhood, how I came up with that value. And if the numbers say that you should come down, I bring you down. I mean, I'm not, assessments is not an exact science. It can't be. Why somebody pays something for something is generally personal. You know, I mean, be wrong. We were talking about this when I was coming in and I was driving down Upper Kevin and I saw the house with graffiti. And I'm like, yeah, if one of those neighbors came in and said, you know, that would be an issue, I could probably give some sort of reduction for that. Or like in our area, when Lenny's gas and sip went up on Harlem Avenue, and they were supposed to put the fence on the east side of the retention pond, and they put it on the west. And the poor people that live right along that level had a 10-foot fence shading their house completely. I mean, of course, that was an argument that they came in and said, my house is worth less, and it is. I mean, typical buyer is going to walk up and go, wow, man, that house, that side of the house, the windows look out into a fence. So we did make that reduction. And I would, you know, any of those things we would look into. But then again, as my famous one is, there's a wonderful person who lives in Frankfort. I love her, she's great. She's definitely afraid. She lives underneath the water tower. She's afraid that the water tower is going to explode and wash her house away. And she comes in to me and says, my house is worthless, I can't sleep at night, the house is going to get washed away. I can't, it's not going to happen, or it shouldn't happen, and if it does, I'll feel awfully bad, but you know, I mean, it's not a reason that I make your house worth $100,000 when it, you know, it's $400,000. All right, so you soft appeal form. You can download it, you can scan it back in, email it to us. You can drop it off at the office. You can supply me as much information as you want or as little information as you want. Scroll down. On here, I ask you to fill out what your assessment was, and that's land, building, and total. The market value, which is 3 times the total. What you feel the market value is. I want to get a feel for what you think the value of your house is. You know, it gives me an idea of where we have to start this conversation, because if you come in and say my house is worthless, there's nothing we can do with it. Second, you can appeal based on 3 things. A recent sale. I just bought this house and I bought it for less. And this is all about the value of the house. It has nothing to do with your tax bill or how much whether you can afford your tax bill or not afford your tax bill. Whether you just bought your house. Did I buy my house? What did I pay for it? That's pretty cut and dry. The one you're going to really look for is assessment equity, and I touched on that. Assessment equity is, am I being assessed in the same vein as what my neighbor is being assessed at? Is his price per square foot the same as mine? Now to do that calculation, you look here, all right? You're going to go to our website, put in your street, find houses that are similar to yours. You don't want to compare your ranch to a 2-story. Does anyone know why? Price per square foot in a ranch is decidedly more than price per square foot in a two-story. To build a house, the most expensive part of building a house is the foundation. Still. Second is the roof. Well, in a two-story, you're splitting that and putting joists in the middle. Price per square foot goes down. So the cost to build a two-story is less per square foot than a ranch. Second, when you sell a two-story house with 10 stairs going up, you tend to move part of the people that are willing to buy. You're gonna have less people willing to buy. Your senior community, people that don't wanna walk up 10 stairs, that tends to limit the amount of buyers, which means ranches sell for more than two stories in price per square foot. Now, there's the thing with pools, and pools sell for more two-story, yes?
When you're saying like to compare like a two-story house
Yeah.
to other two-story houses on your street or in the neighborhood, should we be concerned about looking at the type of model that it is? In our neighborhood, we have
Yes.
like 4 or 5 different models.
Well, the models work, but it comes down to square footage. If you get too hung up on what model is in Brookside Glen, the problem, everyone's like, well, I'm paying more and it's the exact same model. Well, look at the size. Some people blew out a side 2 feet on a side and they have more square footage. And reality is what drives me is sales. And the thing that I'm gonna find the most indicative of what's going to cause one house to sell for more than another house is the size, how big of a box it is. And not always, but for the most part, it comes down to size. And over time, when you look at what prices were, what they actually sold for, size is the main indicator. But definitely, the thing that you would do if you would look at, if you really want to compare yourself to apples, go find 10 houses in your neighborhood. And I only give space for 3. You can put in the back, you can give me 15. Because when you come to a meeting in my office, I'm going to pull up every single house in your neighborhood. And you can pull up 3 of the lowest houses you find, and like, oh, I want to be this low. Well, it doesn't really work, because what happens when I lower you and everybody else stays the same? My job is not to lower your taxes. My job is to keep things fair for everybody. And if I lower you, it just means that she's paying more in her tax bill when the tax rate goes up. Yes?
What do you do if you build a newer home in an older subdivision? Because I have no comparables, I mean.
Well, I do make adjustments for that. More so in the beginning than in towards the end. I mean, if there's a 10-year difference on a brand new house versus a 10-year house, there is definitely, because we've had even situations where townhomes are built and they stop building when the property values, went in the crapper, and they restarted building them again. But over time, that difference, 10 years on a 30 and a 40-year-old house means a lot less than 10 years on a new house and a 10-year-old house. Yes?
Okay, along the lines of what that gentleman was talking about, about 15 to 18 years ago, my neighbor across the street, who has a slightly smaller house, appealed his taxes.
Okay.
And this is a fear I have of appealing, because this man said, he went in, and his answer was, you're right, you're not paying what your neighbors are paying. Because my taxes were lower than his, and he had a smaller house. And it, in fact, raised our taxes, because we had a slightly bigger house. And they said, basically what, was said was,
So that guy 15 years
he
ago
screwed us.
was before me, and that's
So
why
that's
I ran
my
as a
fear.
write-in and won. 6,000 people actually wrote my name down on a piece of paper, which doesn't happen because and I'm not talking about it, whatever. I mean, it's in the past, and that's not going to happen. I'm not here to punish anybody. In fact, there are many times people come in and I pull up the numbers and I'm like, oh look, you're at $33 a square foot and all your neighbors are at 35. Oh, Okay, well, you know, I mean, we'll let that go until the quad, and we'll see how that works out then. But I'm sure it's like not gonna raise you based upon you coming in to talk about your
Is that
taxes.
an unreasonable fare? Is that like an unreasonable fare?
Is that unreasonable what he did?
What, like, cause I'm afraid
Oh,
to appeal. I don't wanna, I'm like afraid.
Is it a fear? The fear, the only thing you should be worried about is that everybody's assessed fairly and honestly and open, and every assessment I do is put online. Did you feel it? And it's there for you to look at. It's there for you to look at your neighbors and what they did, and it has to be open. And you don't want to get in a position where people are hiding things. All the time people come into my office and say, well, my neighbor's got a finished basement. I can pull out appraisal journals that show you that finished basements don't provide the value in a resale that you think they do. And in fact, if they're done horribly, they tend to not cause value. And then I have the personal problem with assessing finished basements that less than half the people that finish their basements actually pull the permits to do so. Now, what does that mean? The only way I know somebody finished their basement is they actually pull a permit to get their basement finished. Or they tell me. And here's the problem, is that am I gonna penalize the people that tell me they finished their basement? Now, everything's with a grain of salt. I mean, you built the Taj Mahal. There's a guy in Frankfurt that put a in-ground pool in his basement, one of these like weird, like, you know, concrete with a water jet that comes through, and yeah, you know what, that's gonna increase the value of his home. And he pulled a permit for it, and there was some value included. But the run-of-the-mill, you know, I've got perfect examples where in a townhome situation, two townhomes that buttressed each other, one had a finished basement and one didn't. The one with the finished basement sold for 15% less. Why? Because the guy was a Prince fan, because when you walked in and saw it, it was purple. Shag carpeting, walls, everything was finished in purple. Now, should I raise that guy's value because he has a finished basement? No. And I generally tend not to ignore the finished basement side of it. And things like we had talked earlier about fireplaces, and some people got fireplaces that don't. In the grand scheme of things, that's not gonna make a big difference in a tax bill. You have an extra room, yeah, that's gonna have some value and it's gonna cause some change. But it really shouldn't be that much. I mean, it should be, you know, 3-step range to a 3-step range, and you have the same, you know, generally the same tax bill. So at that point, you come into my office and say, God, my tax bill is relatively the same as my neighbor's. Why is it so high? And I can say, well, you know, why is it so high? Here's your tax bill. And the great thing about tax bills, and everyone, you know, hates their tax bills, they not only give you this year's number, they give you the number last year. And you can look to see which taxing body raised and why my tax bill went up. And as long as it's a factor that I applied, that 6% that we're worried about, that's not going to affect your tax bill at all. Oh, it's the levy that's being applied to it. Any more questions?
Joe, I have a question.
Yes.
So in Cook County, the biggest struggle I have with showing people how to compare their taxes in Cook County is understanding every house has a property classification, so that you know, like I'm a 278.
Right.
So don't look at, you know, 220s or 234s. Always, if you're a forester, you look for property classes.
Yeah.
In Cook County, do they have property class so they know if they're comparing the right house? You don't have a property class?
There are things that happen here in Cook County that don't happen anywhere else in the state.
I'm just
seriously, it's not even, it's absolutely a weird, and I mean, townhomes in Midlothian are paying $8,000. I mean, we're talking like houses that do. Cook County, I can't, if you had a question and you wanted to talk about it, I could probably go through it, look at it, and figure out what was happening in Cook County, but in ours, I assign numbers to it all.
You know, I know ours are messed up, but I was just, it just makes it easy. It makes it easier for when you're looking for comparables. It's the one thing about Cook County that I like, because it has, every house has a neighborhood, and you can only compare a house within that number of your neighborhood, and a property class, so that I'm comparing 278s, not 234s.
Yes, they all have numbers. It'll say on property record card on the website what I'm terming your house. And that may be a problem too. You may say, Joe, I don't live in a 3-step ranch. There was a point in time before I took office, they had hired some teenagers for the year to transfer some of this over. And I find issues all the time, especially in sketches and so forth. And that's why I don't generally make wholesale changes to neighborhoods, because I'm not completely sure of the data. And it's way past the point, the number of parcels we have in houses, that we could go remeasure every house. It would take much. And my job is to keep your tax bill as low as possible. In fact, my budget is relatively been the same for the last 12 years, just because, I don't, you know what I mean, raising your budget doesn't, just raises your taxes. And I don't want to, you raise my taxes, so. All right, so here, I live in a 73 3-step ranch. 3-step ranch means that there's generally, the basement is above ground, and the upper area goes to 3 steps above.
You can't search for that on your website, can you?
No. Well, I mean, the key to everything is location. So what you're going to do, I mean, you can't look to your house and then go, you know, a mile away and start looking at 3-step ranches that way. It may. We actually just got rid of ProVal, which was the valuation engine, and we've moved to a different one that actually aligns with our website. We may actually have that search. We may have other searches, and that's something that I'm attempting to do. But your main goal is to find neighbors close to you. So you stay within a 2-block. Just go around and look at the street name and the first 3 numbers on the address. You can go through and look at the pictures, find the same numbers. Or, you know, like I say, any one of you guys feels the desire to come talk to me, because you've not had enough of my conversation here, you come in and tell me we spoke here, because otherwise I'll go through all of this again. We'll sit down. I will pull up all of your numbers. Your homeowners association, I would be happy to sit down and talk to them about where the values came from, where the numbers are, where they're moving to, based upon what sales figures I'm getting, and how I assess those values.
Should land be the same per square foot on a lot?
Depends.
That's something Cook County does, Will County, it's Frankfort Township.
Well, we do it somewhat. I mean, it was based upon sales of lots in there. I mean, Cook County does things like they'll, if it's in a cul-de-sac and you have more back square footage, but the sales figures don't really bear that out. Just because you have an extra 200 yards of grass to cut doesn't mean that, you know, your neighbors aren't. If there's a big difference, there should be a number with the land. And you can appeal based upon those land numbers. If you want to just look at land and don't want me to look at the price of your house, say, my land is too high. And then you can appeal based upon that, just filling out the form that just says land. But land is generally a smaller portion, and when you look at sales figures, land, unless it's for a vacant piece of land, generally doesn't affect it too much. I mean, if you have a really huge backyard and, you know, he's built I call it the Taj Mahal of decks, you know, I mean, then there is something, and there is some value. There are some areas in Brookside Glen where, you know, they put in putting greens and, you know, things that are fixed to the ground, and that does have value, and I do add it. Not a lot. Although in the past, in-ground pools, I generally tended to discount greatly because the resale value of an in-ground pool has been less. Until now, until the pandemic, where if you have a house with an in-ground pool, it sells sight unseen at 20% markup, which I don't think that lasts. I think that's just a blip in the way things go. We'll see if it continues. Because things, you know, I mean, I'm not infallible. There was a time when the CN Railroad bought that area in Frankfort, and everybody and their brother was like, this is going to increase train traffic, and it's going to make my house worth a lot less. And they came into I had meetings, and we talked about it. We're going to make these adjustments, and we're going to do this, and the numbers started to roll in. Not only did the value of those homes not go down, they went up. Well, it seems that when the CN Railroad came in, they did an allowance for 50,000 in house upgrades and 50,000 in, or whatever the numbers were, for landscaping. And guess what? The new prospective home buyers paid a lot more for the houses that had the new windows and the new upgrading. And so when it came down to how did it affect the residents, it really didn't. In fact, it sort of kept it even, and I didn't really adjust anything. I didn't lower them or raise them based upon those things. Yes?
You say you don't it's too much. You don't go to people's houses and look at it.
I don't think that the government's responsibility is to go into your house and check your things. I'm a limited government.
Does that also apply when we ask for like a reassessment or like a appeal? Do you guys come check to make sure that we say we have nothing? You guys come to our house and check? No. You don't do it at that?
I mean, if you came in and said, my house isn't there, I would have to go check and see if your house wasn't there. But no, what will happen is you'll submit an appeal form and you'll put as much information on there or as little information as you want. I'm going to get that information. I'm going to pull up a spreadsheet for every house in your neighborhood that's matched upon that. I'm going to compare you to them, and I'm going to see what the median point is and where you are. And if you're above that median point by 15 cents, I'm dropping into the median point. You're going to be at that point. But if, I've got 75 homes in a neighborhood, and you come in with the 3 lowest ones, that we live in a state, once again, that elects property tax appeal attorneys to the state legislature. And there are times that when you hire these guys and pay them money, they can get things. I'm not lowering you to them, because all that's doing is it's compounding a problem that, making everybody else pay more. My job is to make your assessment fair. Not more fair than fair, just fair. I mean, what the numbers are, how the numbers come out is what they are. And not, if there are plenty of people that come in and say, well, this guy's paying less. And I do. I take him, I put him in, we do a revalue and see if at some point that, if it's way off. But if it's like 1% or 2% down, I'm not going to raise your neighbor based upon that. Any other questions? Yes?
I was just saying, actually, I had a question. Earlier you said like something price per square foot. Like you said $35 a square foot.
Yes.
So you can explain that to them? And
Well, okay, yes. So, speaking of land, you're going to remove land from that equation. And you're going to divide the square footage that we have listed on the website for your house into, so the square footage, right there, gross living area, by the valuation I have on the building. So there would be 99,342 or 324. And that's going to give you a price per square foot. And that's the point you are going to compare your value to your neighbors. That brings it down to one single number that you can compare apple to apple. And like I said, that's going to be a 2-story to a 2-story, a 3-step ranch to a 3-step ranch, split level to a split level, all of these things. And that's the starting point. Now, if you don't want to do that, you don't want to go through and check all these things, you call my office, the phone number's on there, and you say, I want a meeting with Joe. And you'll come down to the office, we'll book a time, I'll sit down with you. I will do all that work. I have a SQL pull that goes in, pulls all that information out, everything we've got, every assessment, breaks down the numbers, and nice visuals. First day in office, when I came in, there was an office in the back of it where the previous guy used it. And I'm like, I'm not calling people into this office. So I took my computer and I wheeled it down to the conference room. When you first walk in, I have a conference room. And I go, all of my meetings are going to happen here, in front of everybody and out in the open, and we're going to keep this up. And I had my little monitor, and the first 8 people that came in were all 65, 70 years old, and I can't see that. So my first big purchase was to get 2 big monitors. And I pull up all the information, and we sit there and compare, and we have this conversation. And I cannot tell you how many people come into my office. They're full of vinegar, and they're upset, and by the time they leave, they realize that, you know, maybe it's not the assessment, maybe the anger for taxes should be directed elsewhere, or that maybe the services we get. I deal with taxes all the time. I'm infinitely more upset at the return on investment that I get from my income tax than I do my property tax. At least property taxes, the money is spent in the area you live. You know, there's times that I send dollars to Springfield that if I see 2 cents back, I'm lucky. I mean, you know, really, we don't. And that's a whole nother story. Any other questions? I'm excited because I've been eating rather well. See how svelte I'm becoming? Just kidding. And eating rather well, and I'm going to go to Fry the Coop tonight and get a chicken sandwich. So, question? No? Yes? Of course. No, not enough from you.
If you are not getting one of the services that all of these taxes are collected for, if you don't get one of those services as a neighborhood, how do you handle something like that?
Well,
and the thing that I'm talking about is our streets are privately owned.
right.
So we have to cover the asphalt and the snowplow and that type of thing.
So the problem that occurs with that is that when the builders of your community decided that they wanted to put your community up, they went to, say, the Village of Tinley Park, and they platted it out, and they agreed to cover those numbers. But you are within specific taxing bodies that are already set. So they built those numbers, and you know, the village, you guys come from, do you guys do the roads? Where do you do the roads in Tinley?
Well, some, like we have Odyssey, which is an enclosed development that the village made an agreement where they do the streets, but then you have the Pines where they don't do. They're private, so it's all based on the agreement with the developer and the village and the taxing bodies when they first come in.
Like in Frankfort Township, you're part of the Frankfort Township Road District. So 1% of your tax bill, which is the Frankfort Township Road District, they do take that 1% and they split it off to some of the municipalities, but they cover the roads like Pfeiffer, and they cover all of the interior roads, and they, you know, and then you get to the state roads like, you know, LaGrange and 30, where we just had this last snow, and 2 days after the snowfall, and Route 30 is still untouched. I'm like, hey, what is this? I mean, you know, that's the, you're within the taxing bodies. They were laid down there. It's sort of like, you know, people that come in and talk about, well, why am I paying less because I'm in this school district versus or more than this school district? It's where the governmental bodies ended their jurisdictions. I mean, you could talk to your state rep, you could talk to your state senator and look to change the way that those are affecting you and say, I'm not involved in this, and then that would be the only way to go about it. But you'd have to change the laws behind how taxing bodies set their districts. Does that answer it? It's not maybe not the answer you want.
No, it's not the answer that I want, of course, but is there, other than going to the representative or the senator about whether or not we have snowplow and can get our streets taken care of under the government offerings?
Right.
Is that the only option?
Yes. I have situations all the time. People call up and they say, well, I'm not going to pay this portion of my tax bill. You never, ever want to do that. The government, if you don't pay any portion, you don't pay the full amount, they put your taxes up for sale in a small amount, and then after 3 years, you'll lose it. And that's not a road any of us want to go down. I mean, there's a tax sale, and there's people out there buying taxes all the time. And to have the idea that I'm not going to pay X portion of my tax bill to risk losing your house. The only way to...
I didn't mean that I would withhold paying my taxes.
Right.
That's not my question.
Oh, no. Yeah, okay.
Is there any other way that we could somehow maybe even tag on to an agreement for snowplow? Since they're coming down some of the other streets anyway,
right.
Why wouldn't they just
but your taxes are based on that service. You know, with the water, the sewer, the streets.
Did I answer your property questions?
Yes, thank you.
Your tax bill is all based off of that. You don't have the service that's, so if there was a subdivision where it was incorporated in the village, theirs would be higher because they're covering for the roads, the sidewalks, the curbs. You know,
So that's already addressed in the tax?
yeah, that's all part, like I used to live at 171st and 88th Avenue. It's townhouse subdivision, I was on the board. Same thing for us. We were responsible for paying for, through our HOA fees, the sidewalks, we did our own plowing, we had to do, you know, the asphalt, we had to repair it, we had to seal it. That's all part of the agreements starts from the developers when they first, you know.
Usually because the developer won't pay to make a quality street that meets the village's standards.
Or size, yeah. It won't, a lot of times it's the size of the streets won't cover municipalities, snow removal.
Curbs, exactly. That's the
Right.
number. You have to have curbs and you know,
Right.
some don't have sidewalks, and it's all based on that. And that's why they have their own, but it's all built into your fees. And who you need to go to is whoever's on your board of your HOA, or try and get on that board to address those issues if they're not being taken care of. That all falls on your board and then your management company, whoever, your board answers to a management company. Or I'm sorry, the management company answers to your board. So if something's not being taken care of, that's your management company's problem, which your board has to address with them. And if they're not, then they have to look at finding another management company.
That development was built cheaper because of the roads, the choices they made. So if they would have built the streets that the village required, they'd be getting plowed. But because they didn't spend the money up front, it made the house cheaper for the people that usually want it, and that was the lure back then.
And then that's your price for your lot, and those houses were based, like you say, were based on not doing that. So if you were under that agreement with the village, you would have paid a lot more for the townhouse because you had all those other services.
All right.
So just call your board.
Has this been helpful or not helpful? Anybody find this not helpful? This conversation? Okay. Did we find it helpful? Me? Maybe. We, believe it or not, are in this together. I am not your adversary in this. My job is to put a value on your home that is homogeneous with the other values in your home. And we can all sit there and commiserate on high property taxes. I mean, it's what it comes down to is that there's not, maybe not during the pandemic, but all the time people come into my office, I can't pay this. I can't do this. This is getting to the point that I'm paying rent on a house I own. You know, $12,000 a year in property taxes gets to be, it used to be, you know, if you look at where property taxes have gone for, I think it was, we looked at it, they doubled in 12 years. Nobody's salaries doubled in 12 years. It's becoming a larger and larger percentage of what we have, you know, what our income is. And for the most part, most of us probably aren't getting nearly what the increases are. I mean, we have to look to solutions that are going to limit levies. And I mean, there are political times and people talk about property taxes and they say things like, oh, we're gonna freeze the assessments. We're gonna freeze the tax rate. Doesn't do anything. Just the values go up and then the only thing you can do is freeze the levy. And nobody says that, but you really can't freeze the levy because there's still incurred cost, operating costs for these places. But if you elect fiscally conservative individuals to sit on these boards that maybe don't say, you know what, we're not going to take the maximum increase. And by God, when you see the word referendum, understand that is, I mean, it used to be years ago, years ago, referendums were for, let's build a school. And then that's going to have a definitive number, a definite number of years that it's going to run. And then it's going to end. And then you're going to not pay that anymore because you built the school. But that's not the way referendums run anymore. They run referendums open-ended. And what happens is when you vote for that referendum that they tell you isn't going to raise your property taxes because it's just extending the building of the school that you did, the reality is what that's doing is it's keeping it going forward, and that CPI number is still applied to that year in, year out. When I first got involved here, dealt with the referendum for the schools, and I got into a argument with saying it's not going to cost any money, and I'm like, yeah, it is. And the fact that you're basing these numbers on absolutely, okay, so the numbers that they supply to us, it's not going to raise our schools or raise our taxes, and we really need the 2 schools. No, we needed one big school. One big school, we'd had 3, we wouldn't have to close this one. And it's not an I told you so kind of a thing, but it is sort of an I told you so. They were basing it on the fact that the average homeowner here owned like 1.2 homes. There were so many homes out. And are they gonna have families in both of those homes? And the way that we built out, we never needed this much. And trying to build a 5th school in Manhattan, I mean, we as voters have to vote people into positions that make these decisions, that think about long-term ramifications, that think about what it's gonna be 10 years from now, 15 years from now. Don't even get me started on the pension problems in the state of Illinois and what that's going to do to us in the future, or how we're all in this together. And my main message to all of you here is, at the end of the day, if you want to sit and talk about it more in depth, or you have questions that you don't know, I'm available. I have never once, since taking office, since 6,000 people wrote my name down on a piece of paper, denied anybody the ability to talk to me. I will answer any questions that I can. I will put out whatever I can that shows you that, this is important, and I'm going to be fair. And I'm not going to be more fair to one person than the next. I'm going to be fair to all of you. And it's not about being my friend or being this. It's about having some integrity in the numbers, which is basically what I am as a numbers guy. If you have any more questions, feel free, ask them now. If not, then we can go and I can get myself a fried
Can I just add something to that real quick?
Yes.
So some of the other parts about the taxes that people don't understand, I get emails all the time, they're complaining their taxes are too high, you gotta help me, blah, blah, blah. And if you break down your tax bill, I'm not familiar with the numbers in the Will County side. I think they're 14 to 15% of the villages. But I know on the Brennan townships on the east side of Harlem, their taxes are right around 13 to 13.5% of their tax bill is for the village of Tinley. And 71% roughly is your school district. In Cook County, on the Orland Township side, the west side of Harlem, we're 13% of your tax bill. It's like 69 to 70 is the school district. And when they try to compare the taxes to Orland Park, people forget to mention, not only are Orland Park's taxes for your house just a little bit more, people forget to mention they are a fire district, and so then there's another, 5 to 8% tacked into there, where ours is included in our budget as a whole. So if you look at it, our municipality is a lot lower than anyone else's for what the villages share for the services. I think my taxes are like just over $1,000 for the village itself for 12 months. For you get all the events, you get the plowing, you get your streets redone, your sidewalks, your curbs, and all the other different things that the village does on music in the plazas and stuff. All that's included in it. So if you really break down your tax bill, where everyone has to focus is everyone has to get involved in your school districts, because that's where the lion's share of it is, anywhere from 69% to like 71, 72 on the Cook County side. And Mike or Joe, I don't know what's the what percentage is it of the?
62% for the 2 schools that we have a junior college. But this is not to bash schools.
No, it's just
we have some incredible schools here that kids go on to some of the best universities. It's the reason why, the number one reason why somebody comes here and buys your home is because of our school system. So, I mean, it's a trade-off. We have an investment in our house. This is something we're paying into a long period of time so that when we turn it over and we sell it, we now have equity. And to do that, you need to maintain things like schools and roads and libraries and these services. People say to me, well, why are taxes high? Well, guess what? You could pick your house up today and drive it 35 miles south and drop it in the middle of a cornfield. It's not worth what it is here. It's worth one heck of a lot less. Although in today's climate, with COVID stuff, maybe not. But that's the way things work. And we are, the services that we have that are bundled with where we are is what provides the value, the resale value of your home. And its location and its services. And so when we talked about where you wanted to go, the closer, I will find values closer to your home more meaningful than values farther away. I've got appraisals pop in my desk all the time. This house in Brookside Glen is valued, at $250,000 because this house in, Richland Park sold for this. Well, it doesn't matter. There's no correlation. One's Cook County, one's Will County, and taxes are totally different. But we're all in this together. We all are trying to do the best job possible. And believe me, come see me if you think you got any problems. Thank you guys very much for coming out. I apologize if my talking is not, the best, but.
So if you look here to the left, you'll see the Village of Tinley Park sold 14% in Will County. The Frankfort Fire, this is what I was talking about with the fire districts. Like Orland Park, if you live in Orland, you pay up Orland Fire District. 4% of Frankfort's taxes for the fire district. Ours is incorporated into our whole budget. So if you compare us to other municipalities, you'll see how actually low that ours is. The two biggest ones here, you got 161, you got 210.
Joliet Junior College.
Joliet Junior, yeah, so there's
the 4% fire district is only a part of Tinley Park, not all of it, only a part of Frankfort Fire District covers it.
Yeah,
unincorporated.
That's not for the Tinley side. Anyone that's outside of Tinley or unincorporated, they're paying. So everyone to the south of you is paying the 4%.
I could do, and that's one of the hard things that people don't get is different taxing bodies, different taxing districts charge different amounts. So, people that border one or the other, when it comes down to tax bill time, and like I say, there's people on Everett, every year, they'll fail. Somebody else will go, I was comparing my neighbor across the street and he's paying $1,000 less. Well, 159 and you're in 161 and that's just the way it is. How can I get to 159? You have to move across the street. Those are set. And those were set back in I don't really want to. The Bettenhouse, the group, what's the farm in that? So when Yonker Farm, yes. So the way the story goes was that the people in the area that's 159 didn't want to educate the Yonker kids that were on that point. So that's where the Everett Street was built, that's where they ended the school district, and they didn't want to cover those kids into their school district, so they went in a different school district. Little did they know that 100 years later, that they were going to put down a I-80, and that LaGrange was going to go from this dirt road until this massive mecca, and all of the businesses that operate up and down LaGrange, all of that goes to 161, all of that money. And the way the philosophy is supposed to work is that when you build a business or a commercial district, that money is not supposed to be increased when the taxing bodies raise their levies. That's supposed to be folded in to help us, our residents, cover our tax burden. Because you don't really need a teacher for the Darwin or the this or that. That's not what it's for. It's not the way it works out. Generally, what tends to happen, that's why I'm really interested in finding what happens with the Frankfort Park District, the Square Park District, when the TIF district underneath Amazon actually fell underneath the Frankfort Square's Park District jurisdiction. And then they didn't even,
They weren't notified.
they weren't even notified,
It was issued
and
for-
they did a 25-year TIF, which means that there's no money coming in from that, which, I mean, there has to be some sort of I mean, you know, you can't do that. That was that Park District.
For the record,
that money.
that's Manson.
It's massive, you know, it's massive. So, and what really should have, I mean, in theory, the way that it should have worked is that that money, because it's not like you're gonna have to put a park at the Amazon, that money should have been applied to the overall bill or levy from the Park District, which should have given all of you a reduction. I'm not saying that would have happened, I'm not, because they could have taken on this new construction and there's a whole long thing with that. But if they would have done that, that would have been a, you know, significant reduction to the property tax portion of your bill for the Park District. And because Matt's in TIF district, did it, you know, to entice Amazon and increase all the traffic on Harlem and stuff that happened there. And then now we've got just the housing development that I guess now is not going to happen, but it's interesting. So, thank you guys very much for coming out. If you have any problems, comments, concerns, you can call me. If you want to scream at me, I can take that too. All right? Have a good night, guys.
They said everyone too that missed it. Joe's great about meeting with people. If you want to get his number, we'll sit down with you and go over them personally.
Yeah, absolutely.